Bayonetta 3 is a bad game. In this video, I will explain to you why it is so utterly disappointing. It goes without saying, but this video will contain major Bayonetta 3 spoilers, and while this is my subjective opinion, I think you should take it as objective fact. Because I'm correct. Bayonetta 3's gameplay appeared fun at first, especially with the new mechanics like Demon Masquerade, Demon Slave, Wink Slave, and the abundance of weapons you collect as you go throughout the game. But on a second playthrough, I actually found it quite boring and not very exciting. And at first I thought, oh, maybe this is just because I've been playing Bayonetta, as in the previous two games, for quite a while now. Maybe I'm just good at the combos, maybe I'm just, better at this, which is why it's not exciting to me. But then I went back and played Bayonetta 1 and Bayonetta 2, and I had much more fun playing those two games. And I think I found out the reason why I don't enjoy Bayonetta 3's gameplay is the fact that it feels incredibly easy. Like, when I was in these fights, I genuinely would feel brain dead and almost spacing out because I just wasn't engaged in the battle, because it was just that boring and that easy. In fact, I reckon I could play the game while blindfolded. It was that easy. So I did.
Alright, hang on. Right, blindfold back on. Can't see a thing. Let's go.
Don't think so. You're done. You're done. Strike! Over here, Cheshire! Sit down! Take off! You're done. You're up! Bring it in, big guy! You got it!
I've got no idea what's going on right now. I actually cannot see. Are you kidding? Again? What? I was blindfolded! I couldn't see! Are you joking? Nah, this game's rubbish. This game is actually so bad.
Which brings me nicely onto Viola, which in terms of gameplay, I don't know why she's here. We have Bayonetta, who has loads of weapons and loads of demons to choose from, and then they give us a character who has one weapon and one demon. This makes the gameplay feel oddly restrictive, as I don't have the options available to me to make the gameplay any different when playing Viola. And while Bayonetta does have a lot of choice in what she can use to fight, I still feel restricted, because for some reason in this game they decided that you can only have one type of weapon equipped at one time, unlike the previous two games where you could have different weapons attached to your hands and your feet. The only reason why I think they've done this is because of the new Demon Masquerade feature. Each weapon in Bayonetta 3 is connected to a demon, which allows you to perform a powerful move when combining with that demon. However, if they had it like the previous two games where you could equip different weapons on your hands and your feet, I don't see why they couldn't have just defaulted to whatever Demon Masquerade attack is on the hands, as that would have made sense to me. There are some exciting things though. Usually at the end of chapters, there are these absolutely huge battles in terms of their scale, which include a bubble bath, a rhythm game, and rock, paper, scissors with Godzilla, I guess. And while these battles are very cool, the vast majority of them feel very sluggish and slow, which is the opposite of what I want in a Bayonetta game, where I feel like the gameplay should be fast and stylish. And speaking of things I don't want in a Bayonetta game, they added a lot of things which I feel are completely unnecessary. I think the main example is how the levels themselves are constructed. Unlike the previous two games, every level is very open and has a lot to explore. But I don't want to explore in a Bayonetta game. I want to fight things. This isn't Minecraft. This is a hack and slash. I'm here to fight things, not find random chests. In these levels, you can also find jumping puzzles. Yes, that's right, jumping puzzles. Parkour. I don't know why. I'm not playing Mirror's Edge. I'm playing a Bayonetta game. I want to fight things, not have a battle with gravity. And if this all wasn't bad enough, there's performance issues with Bayonetta 3. And while it isn't a Pokemon Scarlet and Violet situation, I'm still disappointed in how this game performs. This game is supposed to run at 60 FPS, and while it does, I get frame drops way too often for me to actually feel like it's a smooth running game. I also think they must have struggled making these big open areas, because some of the textures look very crusty and very pixelated when you look at them, and some are even incorrect. Oh, and don't get me started on the particle effects. When playing and streaming this game, one of my biggest annoyances during the gameplay was how many particle effects was going on.
What is going on? I can't see a thing.
Not only do they look pretty bad, there's also so many that it's a fight with the camera to actually find where Bayonetta is. I hope future editor me is currently putting some gameplay in the background, really showcasing how bad the particle effects are. And this isn't cherry picking, this happens very often, which is really disappointing to see. To wrap the gameplay section of this video up, if I had to say something positive, I did like some of the big battles. I did enjoy the rhythm game despite it being set in France. I did enjoy the end of chapter 6 for obvious reasons.
Step on me, step on me, step on me, step on me! Break me in half!
And I do think a lot of the weapons are interesting or funny. For example, I find it very amusing the fact that I can be an actual train when playing the game. And despite my love for singing, Women That Can Step On Me, and choo-choo trains, it clearly isn't enough to save the abysmal gameplay that is in Bayonetta 3.
Nah, this game's rubbish. This game is actually so bad.
Well, what about the things you're actually fighting? Well, in Bayonetta 3, you fight these things called
The homunculi.
which are described as
Man-made bioweapons.
and I kid you not, that is all the information we get about them. Until the very end of the game, when we find out they're actually created and controlled by Dr. Sigurd, aka Singularity, aka Singularity Chaos, aka Singularity Balance, aka Singularity Definition, aka the Sky? Look, I don't know either. Okay, so what are they like? Well, just like the average white girl on TikTok, they have absolutely no personality. Unlike the previous two games, where Bayonetta and her adversaries would actively have banter back and forth between each other, the enemies in this game don't speak at all, probably because they're quite literally mouthless. The only taunting we get is from Mr. Blue Sky, which of course again is Dr. Sigurd. So the homunculi just end up seeming very boring. And it's not helped that they're all designed to look like something that could be in my bathroom cabinet. In the previous 2 games, when you attacked angels, you quite literally saw their skin rip off so you could see the gore underneath. However, when you attack the homunculi, the only thing you see are cracks, and not the good kind. So not only are their personalities non-existent, their designs incredibly lazy, but their names are really stupid. The majority of enemies you fight in this game are named after clouds, which not only is the least terrifying thing I can think of to name an enemy, but it also means I can't pronounce half of them. It's probably why I was bored out of my mind in combat, because I'm essentially fighting sentient toothpaste. Overall, if I had something positive to say, I would have said it by now. I've genuinely sat here for the past 10 minutes trying to think of something I might like about the homunculi, but I genuinely cannot think of one thing that I go, oh that was cool, or oh I guess that's good. There is nothing I enjoy about the enemies in this game. And maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, they're enemies. You're not supposed to end up liking them. And while you have a point, you're also wrong. Because in the previous 2 Bayonetta games, as I mentioned earlier, the angels actively talk to you, which means they have a personality, and in some cases can be quite funny. And I end up liking them. Sure, I still want to murder them, but at least they're funny. And to finish it off, I don't think the homunculi add anything to the wider lore of the Bayonetta world, although we'll discuss that later. I'm going to have to apologise because for the rest of the video, I recorded this voiceover while I had a sore throat. I don't know why, I must have been eating too much pussy. The music in Bayonetta 3 is okay. The problem is, compared with the first 2 games, the music just isn't at the same standard, and the majority of the songs are very forgettable. I think a good example is the Moonlight Serenade song, which is this game's counterpart to Moon River in Bayonetta 2 and Fly Me to the Moon in Bayonetta 1. But unlike its counterparts, Moonlight Serenade is quite boring, and probably the only thing that will put me to sleep faster than the gameplay. This will become quite ironic when I discuss characters later on in the video, but I actually quite liked Viola's theme. Her song, G, open bracket, close bracket, st, has a rock vibe to it, and is probably closer to something out of Devil May Cry or even Metal Gear Rising. And while I do enjoy the song, I don't for a second think it's better than anything that's in Devil May Cry or Metal Gear Rising, although I may be biased as I have had Stains of Time on repeat for the past week.
Means the DNA of the soul.
Okay, never mind, this is so much better. Other than that, the only other songs I really like are basically just remixes of songs from the previous 2 games, which just shows that I prefer the music from the previous 2 games. So overall, the music isn't awful, it just could have been a lot better. And speaking of things that could have gone a lot better, let's discuss the story. The story is just so bad in so many different ways. It's actually going to be very hard to try and explain how terrible it is. This is actually my second time recording the voiceover for the story part of the video, because I don't think I went into enough depth about how abysmal the story was in my original recording. Although character specific stuff I will talk about later, because a lot of the way the characters are done in this game I don't like, and I feel like I need to talk on them individually. Not only is the story terrible, we only get to see 90% of it at the beginning and the end of the game, with a little bit in the middle trying to explain what's going on but failing miserably to do so. There's just so much going on with the multiverse and the homunculi and a few other stupid things thrown in there. The game doesn't even try to attempt to explain anything to the player, and it leads to more questions than it does answers. The whole multiverse thing makes it a whole lot worse, because after the first 2 Bayonettas died, I realised that every alternative Bayonetta we were going to meet would also die, which left me emotionally detached from the game as a whole. Plus one massive plot point about a character becoming a weird furry fairy thing. Again, we'll get to that later. The actual explanation we got for that was because of the multiverse lol.
Each world the multiverse loses seems to be making it more and more unstable. It's why he's like that.
I'm sorry, but that is some of the laziest writing in any piece of media ever. I'm actually astonished at how badly the story is written in Bayonetta 3, considering how clever and imaginative the writing was for Bayonetta 1 and 2. Bayonetta 1's story is a masterpiece and genuinely one of the best stories I've ever experienced ever. And while Bayonetta 2 isn't as good as 1's, I still hold it very highly as such an amazing story. And what makes them equally clever is that while you probably should play Bayonetta 1 and then Bayonetta 2, it doesn't actually matter, because both of the stories loop into each other, which just adds to how clever the writing is for both of those games. And for reasons we'll get to later, Bayonetta 3 is weird, because in some ways it feels like its own standalone thing, but in other times it feels like you need information from the previous 2 games to try and understand what's going on. Oh, and the ending. The ending is absolutely horrible, and it made me want to vomit. While Bayonetta 1's ending made me cry out of how beautiful it was, Bayonetta 3's ending made me cry out of how much pain I was in. Again, I will discuss this more later when I talk about Bayonetta as a character in this game. So to conclude, the story is confusing, badly written, and left me more disappointed than a father catching his son watching furry porn. Right, let's get on to characters. Firstly, Rodan and Enzo, who are exactly the same as the previous 2 games, and I have absolutely no issues with them. Let's move on. So Jean. Oh my gosh, do I feel so bad for Jean. While I absolutely love her spy sections, Jean was still very shafted in this game. She feels so far from the force of nature that she was in the first Bayonetta game, due to the fact that she gets stabbed in the back by a guy in a wheelchair and instantly dies. And also it suggested she's heterosexual, which is bizarre considering the past 2 games. The good things about her in this game is that at least the majority of her personality is still there and recognisable as Jean, and I really like her design for this game. But overall, I wish we would have seen more of her and have her be more badass. And now Luca. Luca is where things start to fall apart. The thing is with Luca in the previous 2 games is that he's the comic relief, the goofy pervert who turns up in the middle of the story to give you a history lesson. And while we get his backstory in Bayonetta 1, you could easily remove him from both of the previous games and nothing would change. So why on God's green earth do they decide to make him a major plot point in Bayonetta 3's story, and not even a good one? Not only do they give him a fairy persona that's not really explained, he also ends up being Bayonetta's love interest at the end of the game. Sorry, I'm currently in the bathroom vomiting right now. And I've seen some absolute 3-heads on Twitter be like, oh well, he was always meant to end up with Bayonetta, she would always flirt and tease with him. Well, guess what, buddy? She flirts with enemies before killing them. As I mentioned earlier, all Luca is supposed to be is the comic relief. The guy who never gets the girl because he's a bumbling idiot creep. He's basically a Redditor if his charisma stat was dialed up to 100. Luca's relationship with Bayonetta in this game is confusing no matter how you look at it. If you look at Bayonetta 3 by itself, the game does absolutely nothing to explain to you who Luca is. And yet if you look at all three games together, you know for a fact that Luca should not be with Bayonetta. The only positive thing I have to say about Luca is that he is absolutely dripped out to the max in this game. However, his style is not going to make up for his abysmal characterization in this game. So, Bayonetta. Oh, my sweet, sweet Bayonetta. Look at how they massacred my dommy mummy. I'm going to start off this section by saying how I was actually quite surprised by how well Jennifer Hale did as Bayonetta. I honestly thought her voice would be a lot more jarring than it actually was. And while it will never be as good or as iconic as Helena Taylor's Bayonetta, it was still a really, really good job. That being said, they still absolutely messed up Bayonetta's character in this game. She genuinely doesn't feel like a Bayonetta. All of her unique aspects seem to have been dialed back in Bayonetta 3. While she does have her usual sexy one-liners, a lot of them just fall flat on their face. And I don't know if that's how the dialogue is written or how Jennifer Taylor... I've merged both voice actors together. And I'm not really sure if that's the dialogue or how Jennifer Hale delivers the lines. Either way, a lot of her lines don't seem to have the same punch that they did in the previous two games. And Bayonetta's dancing style in this game feels very easy. For example, I could not replicate anything that she could do from the previous two games. I would be very confident in saying that I could replicate a lot of her dances from the third game, and I've got 2 left feet and the coordination of a Magikarp. And Bayonetta is supposed to be this strong, dominating woman, and the ending of the game makes her feel weak and submissive, and that she needs to be saved by a strong man. Don't mind me, I'm just throwing up in the bathroom again. And don't get me wrong, the problem isn't that she gets with the man. The problem is that she gets with that man. That stupid, bloody Redditor. And not only that, she's submissive to him. Submissive to him! If you put a man and a woman together in your game, and me, a straight Christian man, wants to vomit, you know you've messed up. Because we all know that Bayonetta and Sean are supposed to be together. But Platinum Games must have been asleep for the past 500 years and forgotten entirely about that relationship. So as I said earlier, Bayonetta in this game does not feel like Bayonetta. I think I've made it quite clear how frustrated I was with her characterization in this game. Once again, the only positive thing I have to say is that I do actually really like her design in this game, although her designs from the previous two games are better. And now Viola. This is the part of the video where I genuinely think I'm going to upset a lot of people, but luckily for you, I don't care. There's no way getting around this. I absolutely hate Viola. There is absolutely no redeemable qualities about her. She's not funny, she's not clever, she's just straight up annoying. Every time she spoke, I wanted to cut my ears off just so I didn't have to listen to her. Plus, she has absolutely no character development as the story goes on. She's exactly the same at the end as she was at the start. And the fact that she's Bayonetta and Luca's daughter makes me despise her existence even more. Hey, guess what? I'm in the bathroom vomiting again. And unlike all the other characters, I don't even like her design this time. It's so hard to believe that she's the daughter of Bayonetta and Luca, with her dollar store punk rock outfit. I can't believe she wears what she wears and gets annoyed when she's called Kitty, considering she's wearing what the cat dragged in. To conclude, I hate Viola. She never needed to exist, and I don't like the fact that she's here. Now this is where I would have had the conclusion and my final thoughts. But since the start of me making this video, we've had the Game Awards, and oh my gosh, I could not be more upset. So Bayonetta 3 won Best Action Game, and a lot of people are happy because despite the abysmal story, people were like, well, it was still a good action game. No, it wasn't. Because of the open nature of the levels, you had to go and actively hunt to find some action, and then when you eventually got to the action, you could do it blindfolded. Anyway, enough about the gameplay before I have an actual stroke. They also announced a new game for the series called Bayonetta Origins, Cereza and the Lost Demon, which you can actually already play a little bit of in Bayonetta 3 by collecting 3 keys and unlocking a book, and you can, oh my gosh, I don't care! When I was sat watching the reveal at the Game Awards, I was excited for a second, because I was like, oh my gosh, they're actually going to do the Jeanne spin-off game. We're going to see what she did in the 500 years while Bayonetta is at the bottom of the lake. That's what I thought it was going to be, and I was actually excited. But instead they revealed this glorified walking simulator that just looks a bit nice. Plus, from the looks of things, it's trying to go more into the weird fairy lore stuff that was added in Bayonetta 3. It's a lot of the reason why I was disappointed with Bayonetta 3's story, and very upset with the direction they're going for this Bayonetta Origins game. For me, the first 2 Bayonetta games have always been about the Umbran Witches and the Lumen Sages, and I want to know more about them. That's what I'm interested in. I don't understand why they're trying to delve into this fairy nonsense when they could very easily show us more of the Lumen Sages and the Umbran Witches. Which led me into thinking about what I would do if I was in charge of Bayonetta 3's story. And what I thought might be interesting is if they really wanted to go with the multiverse thing, they could have explored one multiverse where all of the roles are flipped. For instance, Bayonetta, Jeanne, Rosa are all Lumen Sages, and then Boulder is an Umbran Witch, or Umbran Wizard, however you want to call it. Granted, that's more of an idea of a story than a whole fully fledged story, but that's what I want more of. I'm so interested and invested in the Umbran Witches and the Lumen Sages is that I want to know more about them, which is why I'm so disappointed with the direction Bayonetta 3 and what looks to be the direction of this Bayonetta Origins game. Unless Bayonetta 4 is a complete fix from Bayonetta 3, I think I'm gonna lose faith in the series going forward, which is depressing to say, I know. The problem is that Hideki Kamiya has his head so far up his own ass is that he can't see or even admit the problems that Bayonetta 3 had, and would much rather blame the fans than himself. Anyway, I think I've gone on long enough. To give this game a rating, because I guess that's what people do, I think I would give it a 3 out of 10. Because there's a few things I like about Bayonetta 3, but the vast majority of the game I'm thoroughly disappointed by. If you disagree with anything I've said in this video, feel free to @ me on Twitter so I can ignore you. Other than that, I want to thank you guys for watching if you made it this far, especially as you've had to listen to me rant for a good majority of the video. So if you have made it this far, maybe you should consider subscribing. God, I feel so cringe. Anyway, bye.